So anyway, before starting, I'll give a gist again. Reader response theory is nothing but it's a theory which came after formalism and new criticism. So in formalism and new criticism, the textbook, it is given importance. I have a textbook here. It is given importance, okay? And the writers during that time, the critics, you may have learned about the critics, isn't it? They used to tell that everything is inside the text only. You don't have to leave the text. The meaning, everything is present inside the textbook. But after the 1960s, we see this new theory called reader response theory, and here it is started by Hans Robert Joss. And in this movement, they say that the reader is very important. So from the starting, if you come from classicism, they gave importance to the author, and the second thing, during new criticism and formalism, they gave importance to the textbook, and now this time they're giving importance to the reader. And these people who are the critics of reader response theory, they said that the reader is everything. The meaning, that our author will write something, but the meaning is given by the reader. No one else gives the meaning. Beautiful quote is said by Roland Barthes. You might have heard about it. Death of the author, birth of the reader. We discussed about it in the earlier class. When an author, he publishes a work, in that moment itself, the connection between the author and the work is cut off. Okay. Now, after the work is published, the author has nothing to do with the work. Okay. So now the text, it is becoming an entity of its own, but it has no meaning at all. No one knows why it is existing. No one knows what is present inside. And then we come in, the readers. When we read, we'll give many interpretations. Not every reader has the same interpretation. Okay. While reading this book, let's take, I'm reading a novel about partition of India. So it may be Ice Candy Man or Train to Pakistan. You can take any novel. So I'm reading that novel. I have one interpretation, and someone from this class, they will have from interpretation. So each and every character, each and every dialogue, each and every event, we all give an interpretation of our own. It's because we all have a unique mind. Not everyone is born the same. You can't say, these set of people, they're all similar. Their thoughts are similar. Oh, they are best friends. They are similar. You can't say like that. Each and every one, their thought is different. You can't say that, okay, I found this meaning, so my friend, she'll also give the same meaning for this textbook. So this is reader response theory. The response we readers give to the work. Okay. Only we are the most important people, according to the theory. We are the ones who give the meaning to the work. We are the ones who tell that the work has a meaning. It is about a love. It is about a tragedy. It's about a murder. We are the one who interpret. Without us, the text, it cannot give a meaning by itself. So that is reader response theory. So today we'll start the class. I'll share my screen. Is my screen visible to you all?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Okay, we'll start now. I would like it if someone records the video. Okay, I mean not the video, the audio. Okay, because I'm unable to record in my phone. It is hard for me to do. If you could, someone please record the audio. Okay, thank you. So today we'll start from the masterminds. Okay, the theorists I had given the name as masterminds. So these are all the important people. Okay, Norman Holland, Stanley Fish, Wolfgang Iser, Hans Robert Joss, and Louis Rosenblatt. These are all the important key figures of reader response theory. Okay. So the first term I'll be introducing some terms to you. These are all the important terms. The first term will be horizon of expectation. Okay. It is said like this. It is a shared mental framework within those of a particular generation in a culture understand, interpret and evaluate a text or an artwork. Okay. For example, you can take a movie for an example now. Okay, let's take Bahubali for example. Okay, so Bahu, in that movie, you might have seen that Kattappa, he murders Bahubali, isn't it? So now we are watching it. So based on our mentality and the society we live in, let's leave Bahubali ahead. Take some other movie. For example, you might have watched the trailers for some movie, and so watching the trailer, you will expect that okay, this movie will be like this, it will be like that. You may have so many expectations. Okay, not only you, it may be your friends. You all will have some expectations. So okay, this movie will be a good romantic comedy. It will be something about action. We'll have certain things like that. But when the movie releases, it won't be like that at all. Let's take, it might have been a flop. You'll be like, what is this? I thought these things will be present. I thought it would be of this genre. It might be a romantic comedy. It's not even like that. So what happens? That would have been an expectation, isn't it? So you and your friends, you'll sit and you'll be discussing, I thought it would be like this, but it is not like that. So you all had an expectation together. It was a shared framework, isn't it? You all shared a framework that it would be a romantic comedy, but it was not. And this framework, it is number one based on the generation we live in or the culture we live in. Okay, and then our social knowledge, we may be having some moral codes and ethics. So these all, it becomes the criteria for the group to form. Okay, it may be some five groups of friends. You may be having some expectations. It will be based on your culture, the generation you live in. Everything will play an important role in that. That is horizon of expectation. Okay, it was introduced by Joss, Hans Robert Joss. He introduced this term. Okay, and then you have affective fallacy. Affective fallacy. Let's again take. Let's take a movie or some epic. Okay, let's take some big movie. Let's take it to be a tragedy. Okay. So let's guess that you are going to the theater first, not your friends, only you are going for the theater, or you're watching it OTT. And in that moment, you are seeing that it's a wonderful movie, but in the end of the movie, the hero, he dies. Okay, let's take it like that. And after that, your friend, she's asking you, you watched that movie, isn't it? How was it? And you're, after some time, she's also watching that movie. And so what you will do, you will just judge the movie based on, you will be judging. So what will this, when I watched it, it didn't affect me in that way, but she's very, very emotional. Will she cry after seeing this movie? So you're judging a movie based on the emotions. That is called affective fallacy. Fallacy means it is a mistake, okay? And affective, it is affection. And emotional, you're judging a text based on emotional responses. And Wimsatt and Beardsley, they were also important key figures in new criticism also. And they said that, you must not judge a text. Now let's go back to new criticism, okay? Which is the text plays an important role. These guys, they used to say that never judge a text by your responses. The text is everything. They used to speak like that. And that's why they said judging a text based on your emotional responses or some other's emotional responses is wrong. that is called affective fallacy, a mistake based on how something affects your emotions. Now, this term is introduced by Wimsatt and Beardsley. Based on new criticism, this term may be a mistake, but this term is a very important thing when it comes to reader response theory, because in reader response theory, everything is judged based on our emotions. Okay. The next term you have implied reader and actual reader. These both, they are said by Wolfgang Iser. I'll just bring this both to you in a nutshell. Okay. For example, let's take you're having a brother or a sister, you have a sibling, and let's take siblings. Okay, two siblings, two brothers, they are there, and an elder brother, one younger brother. Okay, so the younger brother, he's going to have his birthday. So on the day of his birthday, his mother will be preparing every meal, thinking about the little one. Okay, what he will like. Oh, he likes biryani, then I'll make biryani today. So everything will be prepared based on the younger brother, whatever he likes. When the mother cooks everything, when the father does everything when they do, they'll be thinking only about the younger one. It's not like they'll be having a misconception or anything, but they'll be thinking, okay, he'll like this, he will like this cake, he will like this chocolate. They'll be having the younger one in the mind and not the older one. Okay, now I hope you understand the situation. Now let's come to an author. Okay, let's take now the parents, the mother and father, let's take them as the author. Okay, the author of a particular textbook. And let's take the younger brother and the elder brother as two types of readers. Okay, so what happens? The author, let's take younger brother as number 2 and elder brother as elder brother as number A and younger brother as B. Okay, so the author, he thinks about in our context it was B, isn't it? So the author, he's thinking about B when he's writing the work and not about A. He's not thinking about reader A at all. He's only thinking about reader B. How will reader B react to this? How will he think about it? That's what the author will be thinking. Okay. So the author, the one about whom he's thinking when the work is being written, the reader B, he is our implied reader. Okay. The reader who is in the mind of the author when the work is being written. Okay. So he is the implied reader for whom the work is written, or who is the one. For example, let's have the younger one would be a young adult, a teenager. This is a book for teenagers. So the author, he'll be thinking about only teenagers. He won't be thinking about adults while writing a teenage novel. So the younger brother is implied reader. So now we take reader A. Reader A, now he's he's opening the book and he's reading, but he can't even relate to anything. Why is the author speaking like this? Why is it about a little boy? Teenagers, it's about little boys, isn't it? Why is it like this? Why did this happen? He'll been thinking like that. Because, so what he will do, instead of relating to the author, he will relate to himself, to his own situations. That's what is given here. Someone who has a problem trying to get through and is unable or struggles to understand the complexity or things such as metaphors which an author has used in their piece of writing. So the work, it was not even intended to this reader A. So he doesn't even understand what this author is saying about. So that is implied reader and actual reader. I hope you understand better. Implied reader is the one to whom the work is intended or dedicated. You can have anything. Okay. Actual reader is the one to whom it is not dedicated. When he reads it, he does not understand what is happening. Okay. So that is implied reader and actual reader. You can have it as AIAA. You can have it as in mind author, implied, author, actual. Okay. For actual, it is not intended. And for implied, it is intended. Okay. Ideal reader is also implied. It is another name for implied reader. And then you have interpretive communities. This again is kind of similar to the first one. Here, a group of readers who have the same strategies for interpreting a text. For example, let's take a group of girls. Okay, let's take a group of girls. They are reading a science fiction novel. Mostly girls will enjoy, not every girl, but some girls, mostly girls, enjoy romantic comedies or love stories. But these set of girls, they are reading a science fiction novel. Science fiction novels are mostly internet. Mostly boys will enjoy science fiction novels. Boys don't. Many boys, they don't enjoy love stories. They'll enjoy science fictions. So now these girls are interpreting the text. So how will they interpret? They'll be like, "Hey, what's happening here? Oh, this man is flying from somewhere. Oh, an alien is landing." So they'll be giving their own interpretations. Okay. Or now these girls are having a love story in their hands. So how will they interpret? Okay. So group of readers, they have the same mentality. Okay. It is also given that, you can't say that, oh, they all have same mentality, so they'll be they are that's why they are a group of readers like that. It's based on the way they interpret. For example, some four girls, they are present, and the four, they are all emotional people. So you can't say that while watching a movie, all emotional people will they'll be giving the same response. Each one will have their own response. They will give their own interpretation. So this group interpretive community, it is formed by those who have the same set of mentality. It is not like you have to form a group. While they are interpreting, the interpretation will be similar. That's why a group of readers who have the same strategies for interpreting a text. While reading a text, they'll have the same strategy. Okay, so that's why he did this. Okay. They'll understand it better. They'll have the same mindset. Next, you have affective stylistics. Affective stylistics is like this. A text is examined closely and how it affects the reader. Okay, it's a very simple one. Affection, as usual, emotional response, and stylistics means how a piece of text affects a reader. Okay, in the process of let's take a reader. You'll think that, oh, this guy, he could never be emotional, and you're giving him a very tragical love story in his hand to watch as a movie. So after and you are going and sitting with him and you're watching the movie with him. In the end of the movie, you yourself, you're like, okay, but in nearby, he's sitting and he's crying. Okay, so that is it. Okay, how a text affects a reader, that is affective stylistics. Okay, next you have transactional reader response theory. Transaction means, you might have heard this word in business, like business transaction, a place where or something where two people relate. It is introduced by Louis Rosenblatt. Transactional reader response theory is nothing but it is a theory um, in which it is the transaction between the text and the reader is given importance. How this text connects to the reader. What does this reader collect from this text? That is transaction reader response theory. Like a money deal, what is the deal going on between the text and the reader? Next one, you have psychological reader response theory. From the term itself, you can understand that it is based on the reader's emotions while he reads a text. Okay, it is introduced by Norman Holland, and he is kind of the psychological reader response theorist. And always he used to be like, okay, well, after reading, how will the reader react? These are the things psychological reader response theory is all about. Then sociological reader response theory, it is like this: how a literary work is received over time. For example, let's take any play of Shakespeare. Okay, during his time, let's take let us take Merchant of Venice. Okay, During his time, it would have given some response. They would be like, okay, so that's why it's going on. But now when you read it, it gives you a different type of response. You'll be like, some people will be like, oh, Shylock is not even a bad guy. Some people may think like that. Some people will be like, so much they'll be emotional for Anthony. Okay. So over time, how a text is received, that is social response theory. These are all the important terms coming to response theory. I hope you understood it better. Next, I'll come to Norman Holland. Norman Holland, we just saw that he's kind of a psychological response theorist. This is his idea. How we react to a text based on our psychological experiences. Whenever you read a novel, suddenly it will go to your psyche. Okay? Or more than a movie, a novel affects your mind more. A textbook affects your mind more than a movie. Because it's very simply, if we can put into small words, it goes on like this, that when you watch a movie, they'll be having the characters, they'll be having the environments, everything will be available. But while you're reading a text, you yourself will build an environment in your mind. You yourself will set the characters. Okay, this guy will be perfect for the hero. Let's take you're having actors. Okay, some actors will be setting, oh, this actor will be perfect for the hero, this actress for the heroine. So everything you will set. Okay, and every situation you yourself will build in your mind. That's why a novel affects you more. Okay, so now,
ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, the previous slide கொஞ்சம் காட்றீங்களா ma'am? கொஞ்சம் tower issuesனால screen cut பண்ண முடியல.
Okay, sure.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So now, let's take for example, I'm reading this book. Okay, while I'm reading itself, some kind of emotional response will build in my mind. Okay, and then, for example, I'm reading a tragedy. Okay, so while reading the tragedy itself, in some scene I'll start to cry, but I'll think that no, I must not cry. So whenever I'm reading it, I'll start to cry. Okay, some novels will connect in that way. Okay, so I'll be like, no, I must not let this emotion to, or what will happen, I'll start to cry. Okay, because something in that novel would have happened in my life also. Some experience, some situation would be similar to that event in the novel. For example, it's a tragedy. Okay, so tragedy itself, there'll be like a hero, a heroine, something will be going on in the background. Okay, so there is some kind of emotion, a situation that took place in my life. So I'll try to relate to that. Normally, when you read itself, you'll start relating with your own life first of all before going to some other thing. When you start reading itself, you'll first of all relate to your own life. So that situation will come to my mind each and every time when I read that text again and again. But I'll try to normalize it. I'll put some positive thoughts in my mind and I'll start reading again. And then the third point, we try to focus on an intellectual interpretation to escape our emotions. So what will happen? That whenever that same situation it comes in that novel, again and again, I'll relate to that. So what I will do to escape my own emotions, I will just say, oh, so that's why that hero did this. Okay. I'll just do something to escape my own emotions. I hope you are able to relate. Okay. I'm reading a text and some emotion in that novel, it connects to my own situation, number one. And I'll just try to put off that situation from my mind, number two. And number three, to escape from my own emotion turmoil, I'll try to do something. I'll just try to give an knowledgeable interpretation to escape my own emotions. Because even after finishing the novel, you will be having that tincturing feeling in your mind again and again. To escape, will just give a positive mindset. So that is his psychological response theory. These are the books written by him. The first is Poem in Persons, an introduction to the psychoanalysis of literature. It was published in 1973. In this, it is about the writers. They create text as expression of their personal identities, and readers will create their own identities when they respond. So a writer, he will having something in his mind. He'll be writing a textbook. Okay, so when I read it, I'll create my own creations. Okay, for example, a writer will be having some imaginations when he writes the text. So now the textbook is out. So when I read it, I'll give my own imaginations. I'll have my own imaginations. Okay. So this is the main topic of that book. Then 5 readers reading is kind of an important text. This pursues its conclusion based on case studies of 5 university students who gave free association responses to 3 short stories. They show that the literary experiences are shaped by readers' identities and not by the text they read. So this also, it comes in the same way. 5 readers, they were reading a text. So each and every one, they gave their own response. And the response, it was not based on the textbook. It was based on their own identity, based on who they are. Okay, that's how a response to us becomes. Then we have laughing, a psychology of humor. So what of that? Okay. Next one is Stanley Fish. Today around 7 o'clock, he's having a seminar. Try to attend it. Okay, Stanley Fish should be speaking. Okay. So Stanley Fish, he says that meaning is not contained in the text, but it is in the reader's experiences. Again, just like the previous one, he too, just have in your mind, Norman Holland, everything is about psychology. Now, Stanley Fish, he says that the text meaning, the meaning of the text, the theme of the text, it is not in the textbook, but it is in the reader's experiences. Okay, he used to oppose many formalistic views. Okay, they used to say that he would say the reader's response, it is very, very important. Reader's activities, it is a center of attention, because formalism, they would go only for the text, and they will be saying that the text has the meaning and everything, but this man, he opposes their views. He wrote this famous book, Is There a Text in the Class? It's also a famous book. It was published in the year 1980. And then you have Interpreting the Varium. It was published in the year 1976. Next, you have Wolfgang Iser. He published his 2 works, Implied Reader in 1974 and The Act of Reading in 1978. He was the one who introduced the terms implied reader, the real reader, actual reader. So now when you come to this, first of all, gaps. For writing a textbook, in some situations, there will be some, when an author publishes a work, when you read that work, some places, some gaps will be present. They won't be present in a good way. They will not have any continuity. Some gaps will be there in a textbook. So as a reader, you will go ahead and you will fill in the gaps. Okay, so that's why this happened. Okay, for example, let's take the hero, heroine. They are there in the novel. And as you read, in the end of the novel, the hero's friend and the heroine's friend, they too are getting married. So you'll be like, when did these both, did they have any connection? Was there any dialogue shared between them? You'll be thinking like, no, it wasn't even that. And then you'll imagine, okay, so they might have also met somewhere. Okay, that's why they're also getting married. So he has left out a gap in the novel and you are filling that gap. Okay, that is gaps or interdeterminate reading. And implied and real or real reader, I thought you already. Real reader is another name for implied reader. Implied reader is the one for whom the work is intended, or about whom the author thinks when the work is being written. Then actual and hypothetical, it is the reader for whom the work was not at all written, but when he reads, he'll not have any idea what is happening at all. So that's why I have given. You might have heard of the short story, The Prince and the Pauper. I just gave this short thing to understand better. The Prince and the Pauper, you might have heard. Okay, so kind of relate with that short story and all. You can understand this topic even more better. Then you have Hans Robert Joss. So he was a colleague of Wolfgang Iser, and he started the Constant School. Okay, the school was started by him. Hans Robert Joss, he was the one who started this theory itself. Okay, so these are famous books written by him. The first one is Literary History as a Challenge to Literary Theory. So he says that history of a work's reception by the readers, it is more important, no matter how the work may be very, very old. Okay, but the reader's response to it, that's only important to it. Okay, because in each and every age, everyone will have a different response. You can't say that in this age these people will give this response. You can't tell that at all. Each and every age will have a different response to a text. You can take Jane Eyre for example. So during the Victorian era, they would have given some other response. But as we follow as the 20th century and now the 21st, each and every one of us will give an own response. Okay, so the history of the work, it is not important, but the reader's interpretation, it is important. That's what he says in Literary History as Challenge to Literary Theory. And then he says the literary studies have largely been confined to a closed circle. He just says that, whatever is happening, literature in this books, reading and everything, this all, it is in a closed circle. It must open up. Every reader must get a chance to read. And then he says literature is dialogic, because everything it happens becomes, it is the dialogue between the text and the reader. So that's why he says dialogue. Dialogue metaphor, isn't it? So literature is dialogic because it is a conversation between the text and the reader. Then he also introduced the term horizon of expectations. Then at last you have Louise Rosenblatt. She wrote that text which is called The Reader, the Text, the Poem, at the Transactional Theory of Literary Work. And this lady, she introduced transactional reader response theory, which is nothing but the transaction which takes place between the text and the reader. With this, reader response theory comes to an end. Thank you. Okay, with this reader response theory, it comes to an end. Okay, thank you so much. Do you have any doubts?
Ma'am.
Yes, Sharanya.
Norman Helen இருக்கார்ல மேம், ஃபர்ஸ்ட் 3 பாயிண்ட்ஸ் கொஞ்சம் ரிப்பீட் பண்ணுங்களேன். ஃபர்ஸ்ட் 3 பாயிண்ட்ஸ் எக்ஸ்பிளைன் பண்ணுங்க.
Sure. I'll say in Tamil, okay? Okay. For example, நான் இந்த புக்கை நான் வாசிக்கிறேன்னு வச்சுக்கோங்க. சரியா? இந்த புக்கை நான் வாசிக்கும் போது என்ன ஆகும்னா, இந்த புக்ல ஏதாவது ஒரு காரியம் வந்து என்னுடைய லைஃப்ல நடந்த சிச்சுவேஷனோட லிங்க் ஆகும். ஸோ நான் என்ன பண்ணுவேன், அந்த புக்கை எப்போ வாசிக்கும் போதுமே அந்த காரியம் வந்து அந்த சிச்சுவேஷன் தான் என்னோட மைண்ட்க்கு வந்துட்டே இருக்கும். நீங்க எக்ஸ்பீரியன்ஸ் பண்ணிருப்பீங்க வாசிக்கும் போது. ஸோ என்ன பண்ணுவீங்க, நீங்க என்னமாவது பண்ணி அந்த அந்த காரியத்தை அந்த நமக்கு வந்து அந்த சிச்சுவேஷனை வந்து மறந்துடுவீங்க. அது மறக்க ட்ரை பண்ணிட்டே இருப்பீங்க, பட் நம்மளால முடியாது. ஸோ கடைசியில என்ன பண்ணுவீங்க, என்னமாவது ஒரு பாசிட்டிவா என்னமாவது நினைச்சு அந்த சிச்சுவேஷனை கம்ப்ளீட்டா என்ன பண்ணுவீங்க, தள்ளி விட்டுருவீங்க. நார்மலா புக் வாசிக்கிறோம், அப்ப நம்ம சைக்கலாஜிக்கலா ஒரு ரெஸ்பான்ஸ், நம்ம என்ன ஒரு சிச்சுவேஷன் கூட அந்த ஏதாவது ஒரு கேரக்டரோ ஒரு சிச்சுவேஷனோ நம்ம கூட பேசும். ஏதாவது ஒரு காரியம் அதுல இருக்கிறது நம்மளோட என்ன ஆகும், நம்ம பர்சனல் லைஃபோட லிங்க் ஆகும். சரியா? அப்ப என்ன ஆகும், எப்போ நீங்க வாசித்தாலுமே அந்த இமோஷனல் அந்த காரியம் தான் உங்களுக்கு என்ன ஆகும், உங்க பிரெயினுக்கு வந்து வந்துகிட்டே இருக்கும். சோ என்ன பண்ணுவீங்க, நம்மளால அந்த புக்கை தொடர்ந்து வாசிக்கவே முடியாது. புக்கை வாசித்து முடிச்சாலும் இந்த புக்னாலே உங்களுக்கு அந்த சிச்சுவேஷன் தான் ஞாபகம் வரும். ஏதோ ஒரு சிச்சுவேஷனா இருந்தாலும் இமோஷனலோ ஹாப்பியோ அந்த இமோஷனலா ஒரு காரியம் தான் என்ன ஆகும், நமக்கு ஞாபகம் வந்துட்டே இருக்கும். சோ என்னமாவது ஒரு காரியத்தை சொல்லியோ இது பண்ணி நம்ம பிரெயின் என்ன பண்ணுவோம், நம்ம வந்து காம் பண்ணிப்போம். அதுதான் அவர் சொல்ற சைக்கலாஜிக்கல் ரீடர் ரெஸ்பான்ஸ் தியரி. ஒரு புக் வாசிக்கிறது சைக்கலாஜிக்கலி நம்ம எப்படி அஃபெக்ட் பண்ணுது அண்ட் ஹவ் வி புட் அன் எண்ட் டு தட். புரிஞ்சுட்டா சரண்யா?
தேங்க்யூ மேம்.
ஓகே.